admitted October 2nd after she came in with blurred vision in the left eye, left frontal headache, and some right-sided numbness. CT was done in the emergency department and it was negative, but the MRI shows acute stroke right in the diffusion where the Dr. Gates now. Small, otherwise doing fine. It's in pretty good shape with it. CTA showed the clot and the clotted bifurcation. This will be, you see the white here? That's contrast in the carotid artery. And the black thing is a booger in the artery. That's a clot. That's bad. If you look at the axial, here again is the artery. This should be a nice sort of circular thing. This is a big clot sticking to the wall of the carotid artery. It's not a good thing to have. And this shows in sagittal view, her internal clotting should be coming up here to her brain. Not happening. So her left internal carotid artery is occluded. But she just has this little stroke and a little visual field defect, basically. She's otherwise fine. On the CTA, this is the cavernous carotid artery as it comes up to the brain before it divides. And here's on the right side, it should look like this nice white tube. Here's the left, there's nothing there. There's out. And she does have cross-filling, collateral flow to her left MCA. It looks like it goes beyond this, but it really doesn't. The MCA terminates right there. Again, she's doing well. So she came in on October 2nd. On morning of the 3rd, she was known to be lethargic. Her speech was slow. She was dysarthritic. She had right-sided drift in the arm and the leg. We do another MRI, and it's sort of obvious she has extension, new stroke. I think it's likely new stroke versus extension. So why did this happen? Head 3, she received IV fluids, albumin, norepinephrine, and phenylephrine after this occurred. And it was initiated because the blood pressure overnight had dropped in the range of 73 to 90 systolic. That's pretty low if you haven't included MCA, included carotid. Also on the 3rd, she had an echo. It was technically suboptimal, and to the point that they couldn't determine an ejection fraction. On the 6th, the ejection fraction was 20%. And it was concerned it was due to the depressors. So she was switched to WRT. Follow-up echocardiograms, her ejection fraction went back at 40%, and a week and a half later it was back to 60%.
Was your initial blood pressure?
Initial blood pressures were on the lower side. Even though she had that stroke, her initial blood pressures were 100, 120. She fell asleep at around 30. So, questions are, she got these fluids and everything. So I think it's clear that in retrospect we should have been more diligent with monitoring blood pressure and keeping it up. But the depressors, what would you use if you were in neurointensives? How would you approach it?
So, I apologize to you if I don't get this, that for whatever reason we have technical difficulties viewing. Of course, I'm supposed to play the projector. I did not get a chance to put this all into one single to-do, but rather things that I thought were interesting about the case. So, first of all, the issue of IV fluids and the albumin we'll come back to. Let it suffice to say, albumin is in testing right now in what's called the, is this the one I wanted? It was this one. Which I'll come back to that right now, what's called the Alias trial. Remember, there was something called the SAFE trial, where it appeared to make no difference if people used albumin for resuscitation, except in one group, and that was those with brain injuries who died. So we're just kind of, until we have disease-specific information from the Alias study, I think it's hard to say. So I'll come back to that, maybe, but I think this was the big issue that sort of brought up in front of me was what happens here. And we'll see if I can get the various and sundry movies to work. So, I don't know how that got here. sound good. So I'm gonna like put on my long white robes and get philosophical with you for a while. I do need to disclose more relationships when it comes to this talk. We'll change some of the animals out. And that is that there are some companies that I'll mention stuff that might have gone on, but I'm not beholden to them or biased anyway, from the medicines company, Integra, blah, blah, blah. EKR Therapeutics sponsored the research I'm going to show you, although they don't exist anymore, so I'm not really sure what the rules are. You have to disclose a company that no longer exists, and it's when it's actually been 10 months since you had any contact. I don't know. Some other companies involved me a sandwich, by the way, also, so I can try those.
So did we, so.
I'm sorry?
So did we, probably.
Yeah. So, there are all sorts of issues, I guess, that could go over, and I could ask Dr. Smith or other people questions about. I really wish I could get this thing to be bigger, but I want to focus, obviously, just in the time about this question of arterial hypertension, where this patient seems to have shown up with hypotension, which he claims she then had. You're on board, sir. Perfect. And then some issues about human dilution depending on time. The complications, I had to make sure we had venous thromboembolic disease, which is important, obviously. But you've got at this point is that you've got issues maybe to deal with ischemic brain swelling, there's hemorrhagic conversion. We don't want, we have this belief that high blood pressures are going to force this to happen, or make it more likely. Seizures, might be a function of this brain injury. Is this thing horrible enough that probably not, this patient's probably not off to palliative care, or not a lot's been shared, or her heart got better, but I don't know if she neurologically got better. And then you have all the ABCs, right, that go along with her airway, breathing. I've gone this out. If anybody has a good J for me, that's the only reason I've stopped this.
J2?
Oh,
No,
now
that's not a good J.
that goes under food.
Yeah.
But we're going to look in particular about this issue of perfusion pressure, and then some of these issues about brain edema that come back to. Now, the third, it is the projector. It's a little off the focus. Therefore, it must be the projector causing that other problem too.
Undoubtedly.
Oh, shh. Don't let the facts interfere with a good story.
So, 6?
This is according to the wise men and women of the Joint National Commission. This is where you're supposed to be having blood pressures, because Dr. Smith got all judgmental, right? He said this is the blood pressure, but then he said, well, but that's put a judgmental words there. So most patients, remember, are going to show up. What we worry about for the most part is patients being hypertensive through stroke. And there must be some other reason something goes wrong, which is the cardiac issue we'll come back to. And remember, one of the things that potentially can go wrong that leads us to hypertension is us, our iatrogenic complications. And the patients who are at the highest risk for continued elevations of blood pressure are probably the ones whose autoregulation has been shifted so far to the right. They're at the greatest catastrophe if we lower them too quickly. So these patients are really potentially, the double whammy is if we lower them too quickly with direct measures or something else complicated comes along that makes them low. The other thing to remember is, and I think I gave one other thing this morning to quote me on, you can quote me on this, patients who are neurologically impaired have difficulty getting free access to water. Not you. I was trying to be sensitive. Nobody else displayed their weaknesses or wants it. So
There may be more in the other room if you run out of water.
and in fact, well, that's what brought some in for us.
That was very nice of you.
I don't know what to get for you for whatever holiday it is today.
Yeah, sleep would probably be good.
Fine. So the thing is, in fact, if you ask a bunch of experienced nurses, they call themselves in the emergency department, they're of the belief that 57% of the acute strokes that rolled in to Detroit Receiving Hospital in the 10-month period were dry. And I trust nurses better than any like tag blood volume measurement, because they're a lot faster and cheaper. So one of the things to remember is that they're going to be likely anything that could potentially slow down the performance of the heart or relax blood vessels. They're going to be extremely sensitive to that. And remember that it is estimated, particularly with large strokes, this patient showed up with an internal carotid stroke. We're seeing some direct injury and some underperfusional watershed injury between the middle and anterior cerebral artery and the middle and posterior cerebral arteries. Is that she's probably not one of these, but that a bunch of them have increased intracranial pressure already. So keep in mind. The other thing then, we'll say, well, if it gets low, should we be making it high? Because, I don't know, that value judgment that it's hypotension, we can't sit there with something abnormal. We have to do something, right? And remember that, so if we're to elevate, particularly systolic blood pressure, in and of itself is a risk factor for stroke. And what's one of the known complications that occurs for patients with ischemic stroke when everything looks great and they get out of the hospital is recurrent stroke, in about 1 in 5 within the first 3 months. Some form of cerebrovascular, maybe TIA or otherwise. The thing is that the brain is in charge, and shortly after a stroke, it normally raises blood pressure to try and perfuse those watershed areas. Particularly somebody with an ICA occlusion like that is going to have to get it from the back, or is going to have to get it from the other side. So high blood pressure would be good. Now, in most places, that calls upon the heart to perform even better. Now, there are two things that happen here. Where there is vascular disease one place, it's often somewhere else. Probably a third place too, but it only one arms. And remember that, while blood pressure is said to be 80 to 85% of the patients are hypertensive, according to that scheme I gave you for the wise men and women, that 20% of patients, if you will, their blood pressures are not elevated. And in fact, probably the scariest 15% are the ones whose blood pressures show up low. Because it's usually a marker, either they've got bad heart disease, they're really dehydrated, which means they've been sitting out in the field long enough, they have all sorts of other problems, dehydration also affecting the kidneys, being out in the field long enough affecting lying on muscle, breaking it down, and then having to clear it out, etc., etc. And so, most of the times it would be best to avoid trying to drop blood pressures when they come in, but to be careful. The other thing is to look at the timing of when this happens. So this pump up the volume method where the brain calls for blood, this reactive hypertension in the setting of stroke, usually lasts about 96 hours, and most of it's gone. So what happens is you see a couple things, right? This is talking to the nurse's time. Are you a nurse with all this? Your exams. But, if any of you have worked with residents, there's wonderful things that you can beat up and move around and train. And you see hundreds of orders, like blood pressure, that give this, this poison for that, so on and so forth. And what happens is they get added cumulatively because the number continues to be abnormal. It must be fixed, until the patient is rendered hypotensive. And when does that usually happen? Right around this time. And I see them trying to move things along. Some of it is pressure from care management types, in the government saying, well, the normal length of stay for a stroke should be 4.7 days. Well, that's not a large window in here for you to decide whether you adequately or properly treated blood pressure and for the chance that you will have complications. And those complications are, now you've treated that reactive hypertension, and now it goes away, and you've got all these drugs lowering blood pressure on board. Okay? Or the other problem is something goes wrong with the pump. We'll come back. So this is my philosophical time because you use the word hypertensive, so I decided this would be more fun and philosophical. So you can read the guidelines and go look at stroke, go look online, the American Stroke Association, the American Heart Association. They want you to read these things. They're there for free. I even think some printed copies were over in the break room, courtesy of the Cornerstone Pharmaceutical people. I have no financial relationship with them. They were at least kind enough to sponsor some of this today. And so what is too low and what is too high and how long? I told you we're getting philosophical and, I have that at least one movie quotation in this. I'll toss out, I'm trying to make sure today. So, and remember that there are ways that we behave, right? We can see bad number, do something, right? That's a reactive kind of thing, right? Bad number, there's a reason for this reactive hypertension. We are going to make that number normal, right? Or we can react because there's some kind of cardiac instability or something, right? I didn't get a whole hint of this, so I get a little fun. I mean, all I know is the echo. I don't know, what else actually happened or what it looked like, or I know it got better, right? And then there's something proactive. We know something's going to go wrong, or we don't want to lower the blood pressure too much because she's also had an MI when she shows up, or we don't want to lower too much because we can't get this clot open. We're going to be relying on these collaterals. And and then there are the ones that say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? Well, I don't care if there's a DVT in there. I don't need to scan the head or duplex the legs because the patient looks fine until he gets up to the doorway. He thought I wasn't paying attention. And then there's always the thing, wise men and women have this, and you saw the complication. There's 150, well, this is an urgency to do this in hours. And if you're diabetic, do this, but not that, if you're not diabetic, that's not the effect of being 5,000 feet up in the air right now. And then the other thing is, the presence and severity of what you see and what can go wrong. Some of this actually has something to do with the anatomy of the brain. Particularly left insular lesions. Our girl there is a little high, but pretty darn close. Are known to experience a lot of vascular and cardiac instability. Left insular lesions in particular, in setting of brain trauma, associated with disorders of heart rhythm, associated with all sorts of bizarre EKG changes, which I'll come back to given time, U waves, but panprecordial ST elevations, everywhere. It's an entire heart under heart attack. No. Clearly not. Something must be driving these changes. And so-called the broken heart syndrome, or takotsubo's, meaning that in Japanese, tako an octopus, subo pot. That'll be the movies you get to show that it looks like an octopus pot, where the bottom part of the heart doesn't squeeze, only the bare base of the heart. And so ejection fractions drop. This is described certainly in ischemic stroke here. It is seen far more frequently in places where there have been diffuse hemorrhage associated with subarachnoid hemorrhage or traumatic hemorrhage, and particularly where? Right around the hypothalamus, where the autonomics start from. Right? And so, particularly nurses, you've seen this because physicians never stay around for this stuff. Go to suction patient, he's kind of, he's getting kind of vagal on him. And sometimes that might happen if you suction yourself, you feel your heart rate go down. But these patients, very often their heart rate go down to 0. And sometimes, unfortunately, try to stay there. We decide that's abnormal, that 0 is definitely too low, and we can fix that, right? None of us would argue about that. So the dysrhythmias, and then the issue of organ hypoperfusion, right? We're here worrying about the brain now, but the most common disaster we see are, excuse me, Copeland, my husband's kidneys worked until he came in the hospital. Right? So, yeah, because their perfusion pressure they required is astronomical. It's killing his brain, but, And then there's the issue of secondary brain injury. Right? Do you go too high? Do you get edema? Do you burst open these blood vessels and bleed out there? You extravasate through these injured, formerly tight junctions on blood vessels and all this proteinaceous gunk and water and brain edema, or do you underperfuse it and send the stroke? It's just like too much to think about. We are, inevitably when it comes to stroke, we are always prepared for elevation. Right? We are so used to it that this, didn't show me some case. Well, this woman came in with a blood pressure of 280 over 120. And we gave her a drug, and something, this is the exception, not the rule when it comes to it. The thing to remember also is that in denervated limbs, there's no venous tone, there's no arterial tone sometimes, or it's very poor. And so you can see the same thing, but in stroke we can see the side to side, and we can see the spinal cord injury from top to bottom, where we get a lot of venous pooling. We get poor return to bone. So we say, well, he's got a whole bunch of leg edema, maybe we ought to give him some diuretics. And the answer is, well, leg edema is great. There's nothing in his blood vessels. There's nothing to perfuse, right? And the heart, the third thing you can put me on today, the heart can only pump what it gets. So if your heart doesn't work and you don't let it have anything, right, because dehydration is important. You don't want people to get brain edema by getting fluids, right? And that was this altered thinking forever. And so we have to be worried. They've had some reason to be dehydrated. They may now have a neurological reason to be relatively extra intravascularly depleted. Right? And if we look, rarely have we needed pressors. And generally, when it comes to picking a drug, I'll come back to this issue later, it's usually been norepinephrine. And no surprise, all the brain police, when we sit there and go, duh, we knew this all along. Well, you sepsis researchers finding, that this is the answer because you get some peripheral vasoconstriction, what's missing from the sympathetic tone, and you get a little chronotropy from beta agonism. And so you say, well, this is a great first choice, right? And before I brought up the issue of, as another first choice, the use of vasopressin. Well, as a second choice, and look what lies on sepsis guidelines, and it makes perfect sense in this scenario. Again, do we have head-on head? Well, we've got some in brain trauma literature. Sorry, I don't have lots of little rapid-fire slides here to show you. But at least comparisons showing at least some suggestion of better perfusion in patients with brain trauma. We have to extrapolate because the strokes, we don't have the same stuff. Done in Cambridge with patients who got norepinephrine versus those that got dopamine. Dopamine, what happened is, they were all relatively intravascularly depleted probably, and they got so tachycardic that there was no time for the heart to fill, so there was nothing left for it to pump. So blood pressure went up because it's exposed on the vessels, but they were kind of a dry, non-perfusional elevation of blood pressure. So the number alone was misleading. Norepinephrine, at least seems with it, as long as we fill the tank first, is a reasonable first choice. Well, what is the blood pressure goal anyway? What number do we want? I don't know. All I know from Dr. Smith,
I can take it.
good. Right? All I know from him is he doesn't like that number. I didn't ask him what goal he wanted. What number is he? And is there something magical if he says, well, I'm happy at 91, and oh, that's under 90. I'm not happy at 89. Something magical happened between 89 and 91. I'm not aware. And then the question is, how long do we have to do this? Well, the suggestion, whatever, is, mercifully, I always thank patients that have the decency to get better on their own. It took her 9 days to do it. But, thank this patient very much. And, you have to sort of talk to show a vascular image. So there's a vascular image, and I have to show something about secondary injury primary, and we've done that. We've found it. So, what is hypotension? So when we go to the literature, did this Dr. Smith guy interpret this number correctly? Well, it's arbitrary. We've made some arbitrary adjustments. Nobody's measured the entire population what they need to live. Right? And it is usually defined, if you look at most textbooks, as a systolic pressure less than 90 millimeters of mercury. It's purely convention. Right? It's something that we go on. And we have, of course, these concepts such as this case provoked of relative hypotension. I'm used to living with this high of blood pressure to perfuse my brain, to perfuse my kidneys. You lowered it below that, now I don't have enough pressure head. My kidneys stop working, my brain stops working. We have it in subarachnoid hemorrhage in the setting of vasospasm. And if you shrink the diameter, then you've got to push harder to get as much through. So normal numbers may become now abnormal or relative for the disease hypotension. And the same potentially in spinal cord injury, which I'm not going to get into much more today. Right? We don't have to think when it comes to hypertension because we got the wise men and women of the Joint National Commission. They don't address what hypotension is. But again, there the sixth one, which is now almost a decade old, it's never been updated because there's no new drug or things on the market, and everything is pretty tight and has just been confirmed. So they've hit it pretty well. But we have some normal, if you think about, 120/80, everybody would consider that normal. So if I turn to one of you and I said, what is the goal? What are you shooting for if someone's in septic shock, which we define as under perfusional state, which includes some number in the blood pressure column, right? And we say, well, we're at least going to get the mean arterial pressures back over 65 or over 70, right? Well, 120/80, if I've done the math right, the mean arterial pressure there is 93. So for a brain, 65/70 is probably, I've never figured out this phrase, it ain't diddly squat. I don't know if it's better to be diddly squat or not, but so that may be absolutely right. And pre-hypertension, but wow, you take one of those, can I turn over now to starting to insult you too? No, not yet, no. Please, you're immune, you're busy drinking. Right, but you sit there and scare it. If you were to look at an internal, the standard general medical internist, whether any of them are right? You would say, I'd like the goal blood pressure to be 93 mean arterial pressure, millimeters of mercury. And he'd look at me like I'm crazy. But think about it, that may be where we live. And remember the other thing, is what we're measuring. When we go measuring things, we're measuring these big global numbers. Do I know the actual perfusion pressure at the time in those distal branches of that poor brain that got hurt, and when this woman had the indecency to lower her own cardiac output? I don't. And then once it gets worse, when she starts swelling there, that's like Superman pushing back on the train trying to get in, right? I don't know, is any of this applicable to this survey anyway? We just assume so. This is what we have to work on as the available information about blood pressure management after stroke. Now, the good news here is it means I can do whatever I want and nobody can tell me I'm wrong. So, always quote other famous characters whenever possible. Always worry that some people are getting too young to recognize it. So, if you look at various and sundry guidelines and how they've changed over the years for different areas, what exactly is our goal? I mean, currently it says before we're not going to knock somebody under 220, we're not going to give them thrombolytics. But if we're going to give them thrombolytics, we derive this number from watching people bleed when they got thrombolytics, and this was one of the common features. So don't give them thrombolytics if it's over that. And this 220 has nothing to do with the brain. We got that from a bunch of people ripping their aortas to shreds. But, so we figure that the aorta is useful, so we ought not destroy that. I'm trying to confuse the brain. Right? And I don't know, this number for aneurysms, where did this come from? This came from some neurosurgeons. Right? And you know what it was? It was, well, I should never have gone to school in Texas. I think at 160, he bled, and it's because the anesthesiologist kept his blood pressure over 160, right? Admit nothing, deny everything, right? And make counter accusations or blame anesthesia, right? And then you've got these weirdos like Adnan Qureshi at the University of Minnesota who says, well, you know what, in intracerebral hemorrhage, we've never been able to find this penumbral concept in dogs, humans, or anything else. Maybe we ought to make the blood pressure normal. Right? And he's viewed as a heretic. And it's just like, right? So this is where all this stuff sort of comes from now. That's at least, I wanted to get a little philosophical about this. Then, what do we get, right? It's off to the Chinese